Hello viewers, this is Qamar Cheema and I'm here in Annapolis, Maryland to see my friend Mr. Michael Kugelman. You have been listening his analysis. Michael works at the Woodrow Wilson Center. Thank you very much, Michael, for hosting us, inviting us, and for the wonderful meeting we're having this afternoon.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here with you.
So with the Michael's presence, the one thing which I wanted really to know is that we heard that Pakistan's Army Chief Gen Bajwa is visiting the United States. There are rumors of that. Obviously, there is no official news which we have heard. So I really wanted to see that how Pakistan-US relations are moving in future, how things are improving since the fall of Kabul. We saw that the relations, there was the relation needs some more space. It needs some more time. And Washington and the State Department, they are looking things very carefully that how we have to move on with Pakistan. And viewers, as you know, in the United States, how the Capitol Hill things, how the DOD, Defense Department, State Department, White House, they all have a different views. So we would like to have a view of Mr. Michael Kugelman on the overall Pakistan-US relations. So Michael, how do you see this General Bajwa's visit to Washington?
Well, I mean, if it's true that he's going to be coming, that's inherently significant for the U.S.-Pakistan relationship just because of the nature of his position. It's the Army Chief, which is such an important position in Pakistan, particularly in terms of how it affects policy relations towards the United States. The relationship, I would say, is at a very uncertain point right now. It really remains unclear what areas of cooperation the two sides will pursue at this moment when the U.S. has left Afghanistan and does not plan to go back. But I think it is important to keep in perspective the fact that there's no major crisis in the relationship right now. So the relationship is fairly healthy in the sense that it's not hurting, it's not suffering. If you look, go back a decade ago, the two sides were lurching from one crisis to the other, looking at 2011, 2012, but there's no crisis right now. And I think it's also a good sign from an administrative level that for the first time in a number of years, we now have a U.S. ambassador in Pakistan who's about to go out, and we now have a new Pakistani ambassador to the U.S. who will be arriving presumably in the coming days. So the fact that we have a top official in both countries representing each country, that bodes well for the relationship, at least at bureaucratic levels. But I do think at the end of the day, the bottom line is that this relationship, from Washington's perspective, will continue to be a very narrowly focused one that will revolve around issues of counterterrorism and the Afghanistan issue.
So primarily, how do you see that when the new Pakistani ambassador, it was thought that Mr. Masood Khan is being nominated. There were some rumors here that there is a possibility that he could be stopped. Some people really wanted he shouldn't come. How did you see that controversy? Was that something? Do the governments or do the governments give value to that, or do you believe that this criticism is normal when then sometimes new ambassadors come this way?
So it does take some time when it comes to this process to get to this so-called agrément. I'm not good with French. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. The process to get to the point where the U.S. signs off on a foreign ambassador coming in. It can take some weeks. It can take several months. So, at the end of the day, the long period of time that it took was within the typical realm of the time frame for how long it could take. Indeed, there had been rumors that India was trying to prevent the U.S. from confirming this appointment. I don't know the full story. This is just speculation. There was, of course, a letter that one member of Congress from the opposition Republican Party submitted to President Biden saying that this is not the right guy because of his views and his connections to terrorism and this and that. It was just one letter. And I think that there may be a tendency to place too much importance and influence on what one single member of Congress may do or say. But it's clear now that he's been approved, Masood Khan, that I think that this came down to issues of bureaucracy and bandwidth. Until fairly recently, the Biden administration, it's a new administration, and there were many people on high levels that had not been confirmed. And also, there's just a lot going on. The Biden administration has a lot on its plate, both at home and also abroad. And I think that approving this Pakistani ambassador appointment was not necessarily at the top of the agenda for things to get done. So I would look at this, I guess, in a non-conspiratorial way and conclude that this is just something that took a long time to get done, and now it's done.
Thank you. Michael, how do you see that with the General Bajwa's visit to Washington D.C.? There was one major problem that President Joe Biden was not in conversation with Prime Minister Imran Khan. Do you think that the ice will melt, things will be normal, and then the White House will get in touch with Imran Khan? Because recently, what we have seen is that Pakistan went to the Beijing Olympics. Imran Khan is going to Moscow, we heard. And the third thing that was obviously very much important was the statement came from the State Department when the Ned Price said that we'll see Pakistan as a strategic partner. That was something which is very being taken serious. So do you believe that the ice is melting and Biden will call Imran Khan after General Bajwa's visit? What is your thought on that?
Yeah, it's a question that you like to ask so frequently, and others do. Others in Pakistan do as well. And I would say this, looking at this issue from a substantive frame, I think it's much more important for the U.S.-Pakistan relationship that General Bajwa is coming to the U.S., if that's confirmed, than it would be for Imran Khan to have a phone call with Biden, just because, you look at the history of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship in recent decades, when big important decisions need to be made and when policies need to take place and there's need to be certain types of forward movement with the relationship, the Army chief tends to be involved. And if there were to be a call between Khan and Biden, it would just be a call. And I think I've told you on your program before that I don't expect Biden to be willing to talk to Imran Khan just for the sake of it. Donald Trump was happy to talk to Nawaz Sharif because that's how Trump was. He was happy to do it because he was a business guy. It was just another meeting. But with Biden, only if there's something major to announce or if there's been some achievement in the relationship, only then would there be a call. So that begs the question, if Bajwa is coming here, does that mean that there's going to be some big agreement coming out of that could then pave the way for a call between Khan and Biden? I don't know. Ultimately, I'm just speculating. But I think at the end of the day, if you want to look at the health of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship, a much better indicator of the health of the relationship is the fact that General Bajwa will be coming to the U.S. Much more important than a chat over a telephonic chat between the two, Khan and Biden.
Well, Michael, how do you see that the relations between the Pentagon and the GHQ are good, but there is always a problem between the White House and the Pakistani political government? What are the major challenges, although this is a very tricky, long question, but if you will summarize for our viewers in this cold breeze of Annapolis in front of this Annapolis town dog, that what is basically the major reason why the political leadership in Washington D.C. and Islamabad, they are not in sync, but the GHQ and Pentagon are in sync?
Well, I mean, if you look at the current political leadership in Pakistan, it's very populist, it's very nationalistic, and the Prime Minister himself, has a history of taking these very populist and stridently anti-American positions. So I think that politically it would be perhaps unwise for Imran Khan to suddenly come out and say, yes, let's embrace the United States. Let's find areas of cooperation. Whereas with the Army, there is a long-standing legacy of cooperation, even though there's been a lot of tensions on the security side as well. You have had a fair amount of cooperation between the two militaries, and that not just in terms of policy, but link-ups, but also the fact that you've had so many Pakistani military officers come to the U.S. to attend military academies and vice versa. So I think that there's that legacy of cooperation between the two militaries, and that makes it easier for them to engage. Whereas when it comes to the White House and the political leadership, the civilian leadership in Pakistan, it's just a very different beast because the Pakistani, the PTI in particular, has to be very careful about its public facing towards the White House. It doesn't want to suggest that it's trying to get too close to the United States, especially at a moment when you have this significant forward movement in the relationship between Pakistan and China. And we got a reminder of that when Prime Minister Khan was in Beijing some days ago.
Well, Michael, how do you see that Prime Minister Imran Khan's loud words like absolutely no, although the Americans didn't ask for the military bases in Pakistan, but the politicians were trying to play to the gallery. How much this has done a damage in Pakistan-US relations, where Imran Khan was playing to the gallery and its own audience and his right wing, like voters that look, Imran Khan is the one who is saying no to the U.S. and none of the Pakistani politicians have ever said no to the America. So how much this has been a challenge and damage in Pakistan-U.S. relations, and do you think General Bajwa is going to mend that?
Well, I think if you look back at the history of U.S.-Pakistan relations, there's a long set of examples of Pakistani political leaders, not just with the current ruling party, but with others, putting out these remarks that are highly critical of the United States. Going back to the days of the drone strikes, when you would have the prime minister and the political leadership stridently criticize the drone strikes. As I recall, there was even a time when PMLN officials had called for USAID to not operate in certain parts of Pakistan anymore. So this goes back, and I think that for those in Washington who really understand the U.S.-Pakistan relationship, they know that sometimes it's best to simply discard those, that playing to the gallery type rhetoric from the political leaders, because that has to happen. And I think that Washington appreciates that, and they, officials here know that type of rhetoric can just be discarded, and then the focus can then be on the private conversations away from the media cameras, because that's where the real negotiations get done. That's where the real forward movement can be made. Now, yeah, certainly if the remarks or if the public rhetoric is sharp enough, that could be taken. Some could take offense to that in Washington, but again, for those that really understand the relationship, know that that's just a normal way of how these things play out in a relationship.
Well, although this is a long debate and this is an unending story, but thank you very much, my friend Michael, for sparing some time for a talk on this possible visit of General Bajwa to the U.S. and how can it be fruitful for Pakistan-U.S. relations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.